Hello, everyone. I'm Whitney with AdvocacyCon, and we want to welcome you all to our Advocate Spotlight with DNA Doe Project. Melissa here, who is my other half, is here with me, and we're missing Eric tonight. He had a prior engagement, so we're missing him, but we've got three wonderful humans here to spend the evening with us. And if, Melissa, you got anything, or you want them to go ahead and take over?
I'd just jump in.
Fantastic. Well, I'd love to introduce myself and my two co-executive directors. We are with the DNA Doe Project, and I'm Pam Lordson. I'm the executive director of media and communications. Jennifer Randolph is our executive director of case management and operations, and Rhonda Kevorkian is our executive manager of human resources and education. So between the three of us, we manage this nonprofit called the DNA Doe Project.
So tell us a little bit about DNA Doe Project. What is your mission? What are y'all out there doing?
So what we do in a nutshell, we use a technique called investigative genetic genealogy to help resolve cases of unidentified human remains. So they're otherwise known as Jane or John Does. And we work with law enforcement, medical examiners, and coroners across the US and in Canada. And we leverage the power and skills of over 80 expert investigative genetic genealogists on our casework to send these people home with their names, back to their home communities, back to their families.
That's amazing. Can you kind of break it down? What is investigative genetic genealogy? I know it's kind of a word that you hear in the true crime community. It's kind of thrown around a lot now because of all the amazing advancements in technology, but can you kind of break it down to its very basic levels?
Sure. Jen, would you like to start with that off?
Sure. So when I think of investigative genetic genealogy, I think of sort of three key ingredients that need to come together to make it work for a given case. So we're relying, as Pam said, on DNA profiles, but also genealogy, traditional genealogy research. So the first thing we need if we're trying to identify someone is we need to be able to get a DNA profile. And there's a lot of complicated lab work that goes into that. This is not the same as when someone takes what we call a direct-to-consumer test at home, and they're, spitting into a tube, and it's a wonderfully rich and clean DNA sample. We're often working with skeletal remains that have been outside for a long time. So the lab work can be difficult, but we'll choose an element from the remains and we'll go through that lab pipeline, and hopefully we'll be able to get a profile that's sufficient for upload into some genealogy databases that we are allowed to use. And there are only a few of those. A lot of people, and surely some people in your audience, have taken these direct-to-consumer tests, and they have their profiles in these databases as well. So essentially what happens is our Doe's profile is compared to everyone else in the database, depending on which database it is, some only to people who are what we call opted in. And you get back a list of all the people who share some amount of DNA with the Doe. And if you share DNA with someone, it means obviously you're related. And if you're related, somewhere back in your respective family trees, you have that common ancestor whose DNA has been passed down, and you both have some of it. The more common DNA you have, the more closely related you are. So this is where the genealogy piece comes in. First of all, we need to have matches. This is the second ingredient. Matches that are what we call workable. If the nearest match is a sixth cousin or farther, that's not going to be a workable case because it's just going to be too far back in time where those common ancestors are that pass down their DNA. But if we have workable matches, fourth cousin, third cousin, or closer, we can move ahead. Then what we're doing is building those family trees to figure out where are those common ancestors, because the common ancestors who tie together the people who are related to the Doe are likely ancestors in our Doe's tree as well. So we sort of are kind of reverse engineering our Doe's tree by understanding the trees of the people who share DNA with our Doe. But to be able to build those trees, we need to have access to good genealogy records, the third ingredient. for a successful case.
I have a question. So are you guys the ones that, like, what is that initial process? Do you guys just get the DNA information, or are you actually finding the remains that are Doe's and going to start it there to pull the DNA?
That's an excellent question, Melissa. What happens is an agency will come to us. They will have found remains, and they will have tried all the usual ways of identification, right? Fingerprints and a kind of a DNA profile that's called an STR profile, putting out information, and none of that will have succeeded. So they're really sort of at a standstill. So they will come to us. I'll usually take the first call with them, and we ask what is available for remains, because there are certain things that are more apt to give a good DNA profile than other things. Teeth, for example, are great because that tooth enamel is protecting that DNA in the tooth, right? We also like some foot bones are good, and certain places in the skull that are DNA rich. So we'll look at what there is to work with, and then we will make a recommendation to the agency about what lab to send it to. And we always choose a lab that's the best fit for the particulars of the case. So if it's a really challenging sample, there's one lab we go to that, comes out of what's called paleogenomics, so way back. So they're, very adept at dealing with super difficult samples, but it's also pricey. If we have a blood card, if someone was found shortly after they passed, for example, that is super easy to get a DNA profile for. So we're not going to send that to the high-end lab. That one we can, send to a different lab for a few $100s. So we're helping the agency by directing them to the lab that is probably the best fit for the case. We also take on the administrative burden. You need DNA extraction, getting DNA out of that sample. Then you need to sequence it, because we look at whole genome sequencing. So that's another step. And then it needs to go into bioinformatics. And those pieces are often, with different entities. So it's a bit of a, administrative process to shepherd it through. And we recognize that our partner agencies are often, not staffed completely or strapped for time. So anything we can do to facilitate this attempted identification going forward, we're going to do that.
You talked a little bit about the cost just then. Obviously, DNA testing is incredibly expensive because the science behind it is just astronomical. It's way over my head. I'm not smart enough to understand all of it. So what's the average cost for DNA testing? For instance, the blood card versus a bone extraction. Can you kind of give me the scale?
Sure. If it's a blood card, we might be able to do extraction and whole genome sequencing for $700, for example. If it's a bone case or rootless hair, which, believe it or not, we can now also use, then we're well into the thousands of dollars. It could be anywhere from, $4,000 to $7,000 or $8,000. And this is all assuming everything works on the first go. And then bioinformatics, where they take that huge amount of data, because it's whole genome sequencing, and they have to distill it into a small profile that mimics the profile we get when we take a direct-to-consumer test, right? Because you're wanting to compare your dough to what people get when they take, for example, Ancestry DNA. So you need that apples-to-apples comparison. So you've got to take that huge amount of data and distill it down. And that's bioinformatics. So that's another cost. And then next you have to upload it to the databases we're allowed to use. So there's GEDmatch on the public side, Family Tree DNA, and then DNA Justice. So upload fees are unfortunately pretty steep. It's $1,000 for us to upload into GEDmatch Pro, which is the side we upload to. And then it's $1,400 to upload to FTDNA. So you can see how these costs are accumulating, and it's, you can easily spend $8,000 on a case or more. Sometimes the lab work doesn't work the first time and you have to try again. So you're having to double a lot of those costs. So it can be prohibitively expensive. agencies sometimes have funds, especially if it's a homicide victim, because they'll have funding in service of the investigation, right? They need to know who the victim is to investigate the homicide, generally speaking. But if it's a doe whose manner of death is undetermined or is something, other than homicide, it's very hard for agencies to find the funding to work those cases. And that's where we can come in. We're sort of a safety net, because we will, the genealogy is always free. We always provide that free. That's our mission. But we'll also try to pay for that lab work if the agency doesn't have the funds.
That's one of the great reasons to be a nonprofit working in this field, right? That we can activate the donors who believe in our mission, and then use the funding that they provide to us to help us make sure that that all the cases that want to come to us can afford the process.
That's so amazing. We had a couple of questions hop in the chat real quick, if y'all are okay with answering those, or we can wait until the end, whichever you prefer.
I'm all about do it when it comes up. Absolutely.
Perfect. So the first one is, do you have your own genealogist that helps you, or do you have kind of a team, a trusted network?
Rhonda, would you like to speak to how we do teams?
Sure. We have a pool of about 85 or so genetic genealogists.
Wow.
And as cases come in, I'll form teams for those cases. And so we get to work with all different people in the organization. So it's great to kind of come together, and, it's exciting at first. We have a puzzle to solve, right? So it's really fun to work together and work towards that identification.
That's amazing. That's a big number of genealogists to have kind of at your when you need them. I can't think of the phrase I was trying to say there.
And they are some of the best
selected, right? These are the ones that we've looked at their skill set, and we know that they're capable of doing the work that we do. We get upwards of 1,000 applications to volunteer with us a year.
We do.
So people are very interested in participating and helping with these cases. And at some point we hope to grow so that we can have an even bigger team and take on even more cases and fund all the cases that want to come with us. That's our strategic goals for the future.
That's amazing. Whitney and I always talk about people really do want to help. They just don't always know how to. But yeah, getting involved with a nonprofit is just such an amazing way to give back and to help, especially if you can't afford monetarily. But that's amazing that you have so many that know how to do that, because I didn't even know there were that many people that just knew how to do genealogy.
And our volunteers are so dedicated. They last year gave over 15,000 hours of their, professional level investigative genetic genealogy services to the organization. So it is, some of the cases are very long haul. They take a really long time to resolve, and then some of them happen, in a day or two. So it's hard to tell when you get started, but their commitment is really, really durable. So
that's
Rhonda,
amazing.
do you want to speak? Sorry, I'm reading the question on the screen. I'm taking over. Help me, Whitney.
You're fine. This is your show. Take over. It's fine.
I'm hoping Rhonda can talk a little bit about the process of applying.
Yeah,
sure. And so applying, I'm taking this to mean applying as a volunteer. If we have people who are suggesting cases to us, we only work in partnership with law enforcement, medical examiners, and coroners. So in order for us to take a case, it's not just based on, are we interested in the case? We have to develop that partnership. So most of our cases come to us through our partner agencies, or they inquire, they meet Jen at a conference, and they decide to work with us on a case. We get a lot of suggestions of cases from the public. And right now we're super busy with cases that are flowing in through the regular pipeline, but at some point when things slow down, we probably will start doing a little bit of outreach to say, hey, someone from the public suggested this case for us. And you know, if you're interested in working with us, we'd like to talk to you. So, but right now we're doing pretty well, just capturing cases from clients who come to us. And then, Rob, do you want to talk about applying to volunteer?
Sure. If you go to our website, DNADoeProject.org, there's a place where it says contact us. Click on that, and there will be a place to fill out a volunteer application. Scroll down a little bit to see it, but it will be there. And you tell us a little bit about yourself and what your skills are. We often need volunteers in all different areas. So if you're familiar with nonprofits, want to help out with fundraising, for example, we'd like to hear all of that, what your skills are, what you're willing to help us out with. And then if a position comes up that you're a good fit for, you'll hear from me.
That's awesome. Hopefully we can get you some volunteers.
That would be great. Yes.
So can we talk a little bit about the impact of IGG, or investigative genetic genealogy? That's a tongue twister if you say it too fast. On cases that have been cold for decades. I think the biggest one that people talk about, because it was one of the first most well-known one, is the Golden State Killer case, that a man was arrested due to investigative genetic genealogy. So can you talk a little bit about how the impact of this new technology has been on cold cases?
Jen, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I don't think it's an overstatement to say it's been a game changer. Before investigative genetic genealogy, whether you're looking at trying to identify a Doe or identify a potential suspect whose DNA is at a crime scene, if there wasn't an exact match in CODIS, which relies on a very different kind of DNA profile, or a first-degree relative who had a missing person, you were just kind of out of luck, and you were just sitting around waiting for that to happen, right? If you'd exhausted all the other leads. Now we have a technique where you don't need that close relative. You just need a few, relatively distant cousins. I don't know my third cousins. I don't know how many people do. I'm sure some do, but people who don't even know the Doe, right? Their profiles taken together as a group, whoever is matching the Doe, they will lead you or can lead you to the right person. So that is, completely different scenario than having to have that, exact match, or a parent, child, or full sibling, because often that's just not possible. So it's really changed the landscape. And these cases that have been cold, sometimes for decades, not just the Golden State Killer case, but a lot of our Doe cases go way back, to the 70s, the 80s. So there are families that have been waiting and wondering and not knowing and having that ambiguity for decades, that finally now are being able to get some answers. Not the answers they hoped for, surely, but I think at least a resolution, and then they can process, right, what the situation is. So it really has made a huge difference.
And
yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Melissa.
Oh, I was just saying, in the news, we follow obviously cases pretty in depth, and it is just like every week another one is being solved. It's just incredible.
Yeah, and we've worked with law enforcement agencies where the detective has literally spent his whole career with this case, and picking it up and reviewing it and finding nothing new and setting it down again and picking it up in 6 months and trying again. And they bring the case to us, and it's you can see the burden lift from them. We've had several people tell us, well, now I can retire, because I couldn't leave this job not knowing who she was. And now I, it alleviates that. And for families, that is, exponentially more so. that ambiguity, that not knowing what happened is a burden on them. So later this year in the summer, a documentary series is going to air that features our work. And I'm hoping, you'll be hearing more about that. Hopefully we will have, by the time AdvocacyCon comes around, hopefully we will have clearance to start talking a little bit more about the series. But it's coming in the summer. And we are really excited to give people a look behind the scenes on our work, and also a glimpse into the families, because the documentary series follows the case all the way through to speak to the family members who are finding out for the first time what happened to their loved one. And it's very powerful and impactful. And we always knew our organization had impact, but seeing that in that moment has been really affirming for us as well.
Wow.
Well, congratulations for that. That's amazing.
Thanks. Yes, it's been a long time coming. We've been working on it for quite a while.
It seems like that's how things work out. It's like, hurry up and wait. You talked about law enforcement or coroners come to you with this. Do you have like a backlog of cases or John and Jane Does that you haven't gotten to yet? Or like, what is that process of, how do you just decide, like, okay, we do have time or funding for this? Like, how do you make that determination?
We generally will take any case as long as, the usual methods of identification have been exhausted. The bottleneck is funding if they don't have the funding for the lab work. I have hundreds, and I'm no exaggeration, we could be doing hundreds more cases if we had the funding for the lab work for those agencies, and we just don't. So when we do get funding, I will have talked to a lot of people, and I try and sort of, spread the love a little bit. We work many cases with some agencies, but then there are a lot of, agencies we haven't worked with yet who are waiting. So when we do get funding, I'll start reaching out and saying, okay, now I've got funding, what's your most important case? And let's start there. But the need for this is just so big. And as we've already talked about, the costs are just high enough that it's a real stumbling block. So as Pam said, one of our strategic goals is to really bolster our fundraising, get more eyes on our work, find people who they hear our mission and it resonates with them. Because the more donors we have, the more agencies we can help, and the more families there are that are going to get a resolution. So yeah, no shortage of cases, just money.
Yep.
I feel like that's always the problem, is that there's just not enough money to help resolve these issues. One of the questions that did pop in was, how can we get some of the groups that don't normally go for a DNA test, such as Indigenous populations, people of color? You see that there's lesser numbers in the databases of people of different populations.
That's exactly right. And then, I think that this is the kind of very, very personal decision to take a DNA test and share it with, especially with law enforcement, that it is about building trust, and it is not about, just saying, trust me, I got this. It takes time. It takes a lot of intentionality, and it takes finding those brave people who are willing to lead the way into that, and then helping them be successful. So we have solved a handful of Native American cases that helps us develop that trust with the community. We've solved, more than that, African American cases. We've very intentionally recruited African American researchers, and we work every day to sort of make sure that we both build and sustain the trust of the public who are helping our work by uploading to databases.
And just to follow up on that, I think too, there's an educational component, because there are a lot of misconceptions about just what people can access and how it can be used. So it's really important that people understand. But as Pam said, it's not like there aren't risks either. So people need to understand all the benefits and all the risks and make that really personal decision. This does bring up something that I think is really special about our organization. Because we do that genealogy pro bono, we aren't charging the agencies for it. Whether a case takes 3 hours or 2,000 hours, the cost of research, the cost to the agency is zero. So on average, those cases that are Indigenous populations, people of color, or more recent immigrants are much more difficult, and they're going to take a lot more time. And if agencies had to pay per hour, they would be out of reach. They wouldn't be able to afford to work those cases. So we're here to say everybody gets at least an opportunity to be identified, because no matter how challenging the case, and we have worked and resolved cases that took us 5 years, not kidding. And we have some we've been even working longer. We will not stop. And again, it's not going to cost the agency anything. So all Does at least have that opportunity to be identified.
That's just amazing. I'm like blown away by your work.
We feel the same. I feel that way every day. Yeah.
Every time I when we signed up for our podcast is signed up for your press releases, and every time we get an email come through about an identification, it just like warms my soul so much, because y'all are doing such incredible work.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about how we can help as Melissa and I's podcasters, as the advocacy conference. What can we do to help people get involved outside of volunteering and donating money? What's the best way?
I think helping us tell our stories. So when you feature our cases on a podcast and help spread the word, when you invite our experts to participate and to speak to the process of IGG and help educate the public, all of that helps. We're growing kind of our collective community understanding of what these techniques are, and building this network of people who are willing to share their DNA in the databases. I think, asking people to upload, sharing with them the benefits to their family, to their neighbors of uploading, that is a big piece of it as well.
What about social media? Do you guys feel that, you guys have an amazing presence on Facebook. I was looking at it earlier. Do you think that really helps get the stories out there or helps with the funding? Like what's your guys' feeling about social media?
It's a little hit or miss, I'll be honest. And I'm going to give you a concrete example. We recently did a boosted post for 2 Hispanic Does, cases that we've been working on for a while. And one has genealogy that traces back to Colombia, and one has ancestry in Central America. So slightly different regions. And we boost geographically into the areas with some information about the case, in case somebody recognizes the names or the locations, or in some cases, a reconstruction portrait of the doe. When we boosted into Colombia, we got a lot of suspicion about, what our motives were. And we were trying to answer questions in Spanish, and it was a little challenging to figure out what exactly they were upset about. And it kind of, it went into Colombia, it got seen by quite a few people, but people didn't really share the post. When we boosted into Central America, completely different outcome. We had tons of views, but then something like 15,000 shares of the post itself by individuals who saw it. So that, and I find myself like scratching my head, like what was different between these 2 posts that made that so different. That said, social media is really, really powerful in terms of getting eyes on the information, in terms of building understanding and recognition of what we're doing and who we're trying to help. And it's, you know, it's definitely something that we lean on quite a bit to get the word out.
And I literally
is not so, you know, it's
Yeah.
you know, we get a little bit through Facebook. Thank you to everyone who's ever hosted a birthday fundraiser for us, because those are the biggest, those are the big ones. We, you know, we look to the connections that we make with individuals and people on social media to then talk further about funding cases and funding the organization.
Wow, just learned that you're worldwide as well. I guess I was just thinking America, but that's amazing that you guys really going, you know, putting effort into the other countries to figure out where they came from and who they are. So, amazing work.
Do each of you have a case that you have worked on since becoming a part of DNA Doe Project that has impacted you?
Absolutely. I'll tell you about a case that I worked on. The Doe ended up being a 13-year-old girl who was born about the same time that I was. So this really touched me. I thought about what I was doing at age 13 and, you know, how she must have ended up where she did. She was recovered from a Little League ballpark, buried there. And
Oh, wow.
just the thought of that, of the thought of everything I got to experience from the age of 13 until now, and everything she missed out on in life, it's just unfair. And she did not deserve that. And she just playing a small part in helping to bring her home was an amazing experience, one I'll never forget.
Wow.
Jen, do you have a case that's in your heart?
I do. When I was sort of a baby genealogist and looking at going professional and leaving my first career, I took a course and they profiled a particular case. And this was really before Golden State Killer. And it was more, okay, here's a doe. What can a genealogist look at? Like, what clothing was she wearing? What are the labels? You know, sort of using genealogy that way as opposed to in conjunction with DNA. And it happened to be a New Hampshire case. And that's what sort of inspired me to, you know, get into investigative genetic genealogy when the DNA did become, you know, a thing, genetic genealogy. And we actually were given that case and we were able to resolve it. So that really felt like kind of a full circle moment for me. And, you know, it was local to where I am. So I think, you know, as Rhonda said, she related by, you know, remembering and relating, you know, what it was like to be a 13-year-old. And for me, it's like, well, I'm in New Hampshire and she was in New Hampshire. And I think that's true. I think often our researchers, you know, will be, you know, sort of called in a way because they do relate to our does, right? And in some fashion. And that's, I think, one piece of what fuels their passion for the work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Pam, do you have
Pam?
one?
I actually, I've only ever worked on one case. I'm the media and comms person, so I'm kind of an unusual person at DDP because just about everybody else has, you know, they may have a professional role, but then they also work cases. But the case that Jen and I have worked on recently has been put into a category where we are just in a holding pattern until we find some new information. Some new matches need to come into the database, or new information needs to be generated on the detective side of it. And it is a case that actually took place in the woman was located in the county where I come from in Southwest Washington State. And she was found in a really sort of obscure logging road, you know, place that only people who are avid hunters or people who are out in the forest doing what they call cutting shakes, breaking down cedar trees in order to sell the wood products. Those are the only people that ever go there. And they found this woman's remains. She was fully skeletonized in 1988. Jen, is that 88 or 85?
I think
Yeah, right around that time.
Yeah.
So I was in high school in 1985. And so thinking about, and she was probably already in the woods, right? When I was in high school and living my senior year, life. And that, and I remember hearing nothing about that case. And for me, that was like, wow, this is where I grew up, and it's not in the public realm. And so my major contribution has been to try to get more media attention for the case, and make sure that people don't forget, and you just can't help but wonder, who was she? How did she get to that spot? Who would have taken her there? She was a murder victim. So who wanted to take her out in the woods and kill her? And knowing who she is will give the local sheriff's department then some sort of direction for figuring out who killed her.
Yeah, it's the first step. They have to figure out who they are before they can even figure out victimology, where she was last. Oh, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And when you were asking me about this technique, and I was saying what a game changer it is, one thing I forgot to say is that even if the technique doesn't get you all the way to the precise person, it can give you enough information to at least narrow down the pool or know where to focus those media efforts that Pam was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, the victim is likely Cambodian or Southeast Asian, so very underrepresented in the database.
Mm-hmm.
But just knowing that, when in some cases the doe could be, the universe, right? Just being able to narrow that down can really help. We had one Indigenous case of a woman who was found murdered in California, and just sort of based on her appearance, the thought was she might be Hispanic or perhaps from a local tribe there in California. Well, as soon as we got the data back, we could immediately see that, in fact, she was from Canadian Indigenous populations. So they were total, and she had distinctive tattoos. Why didn't anyone recognize her? Well, they were looking in the complete wrong area, because that's not where her ancestry was. And by knowing the sort of circumscribed geographic area and the community, the Cree community that she was from, we were able to put together one of those sort of media packets that Pam was talking about, reach out to communities, of Cree in those areas and say, would you mind posting this with these distinctive tattoos? And it wasn't but a day or two that it was in front of the right eyes, and the case was resolved. So it wasn't the genealogy that got it all the way over the finish line, but it was the technique that at least got enough information that it did get resolved.
It put you in the right direction,
Right.
because the chances of her being identified in the wrong geographical area is slim to none. So it puts you down the right path. Like you said, it just didn't get you all the way over the line, but it wouldn't have got there without you.
Yeah.
Is this, you might not even know, where you might not have like an estimate, but like how much time, if funding wasn't a problem and you did the sequencing, how long are we talking till you could possibly identify someone? Or is there just too many variables that it could be just a wild number?
It is so hard to predict. Even the lab is hard to predict, because we're at the mercy of how busy the labs are, and it's the holidays and everyone shuts down. But the labs can easily take, if it's a bone extraction, 6 months. 6 months to get that profile to upload. Sometimes more, sometimes less. And then it's really hard to predict the genealogy. You can look at the matches that you get and what's the ancestry of the doe, and kind of make a, educated guess. Like on average, if it's a Northwestern European Caucasian person, it's probably going to have good matches, and it's probably not going to be too hard. But then you find out they were adopted out. And so you may be able to figure out who mom and dad are. But if this was a child who was surrendered as a newborn, you can be stuck. We've been able to resolve some of those, but So, and that's just hard to predict. And sometimes
Mhm.
you'll get someone from a population that's really challenging, but you just happen to be really lucky and get a high match, and you can figure it out. So I think it's really hard to predict.
It depends.
But I don't know what Rhonda, would you agree?
I mean, it could take hours or it could take years. I mean, and everywhere in between.
Okay. Whitney and I had went on a foot search, and we found we found the evidence, then law enforcement found the human remains, and it was in DNA testing for what, 2.5 years? Whitney,
Yeah.
was that?
They had to
almost
test it 3 different
years.
times. The
Yeah.
first test didn't warrant a large enough sample for them to positively identify him. It was Brandon Lawson. So they sent it to a second lab. The second lab was able to get, I believe it was an 80 to 85% match, but they wanted 90%. So they had to run it a third time, which they were able to pull enough data to positively identify him. But it took almost 3 full years before we got information back, because it was very difficult for them to get a sample. So, and he was a white male from Texas, and they had DNA to compare it to. So I can understand where it would be very, very difficult to process all of it, especially if you have nothing to compare it to. It's just, you have the data. Now let's stick it out there and see what connects. Again, it's a puzzle that you're just trying to put together.
Yeah. And the general public on that was just like, why is that taking so long? Something's fishy about this. And we're like, literally, we don't know. Like, it just takes this long.
It is what it is. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, interesting.
Have you ever been able to reach out to scientists in foreign countries? And have you noticed any particular countries that are starting to really use DNA and tracing people like we are with IgG?
Jen, I think you interact with more people from other countries. Jen goes to a lot of professional conferences with medical examiners and law enforcement, and connects with people.
Yes. I have to be a little careful here. We have, been in contact with countries in Europe. I think the UK is looking like it's going to start using this technique. And I want to say just in the last few days, was it Sweden?
Norway.
Norway. Yep. It looks like they're going to start using it. Australia has been using it. So I think, it's likely to spread to more places. But interestingly enough, some European countries don't allow people to take those direct-to-consumer tests because of just very, privacy concerns and the legislation they have. So, I don't know what's going to happen in those countries, because then since, people aren't testing, they aren't in the database. So then it becomes a lot harder to use the technique. But I think as people see the power of it, and that, it's really, I think, pretty difficult if you know what you're doing, that you would suggest the wrong person. It either kind of comes together and you see it and it all makes sense, or it just doesn't come together if there's a problem with the data or something like that. So it's a pretty reliable technique. And I think as people see that and recognize the power of it, it's exciting to think about adopting it, especially when you have these really cold cases, people who have never gotten justice or never made their way back to the family. So it'll be interesting to see, but more and more countries are, taking it on and using it.
And I think as time goes, the process is going to get easier. Like you said, more people in the database is going to help. Like, I feel it's coming together quicker than I ever thought it would, back from when the Golden State Killer, and this was like totally, everyone was like, how in the world did they do this? It was out of nowhere. It just seems like it's rapidly evolving, the DNA, what they're able to do, what they're able to even extract from the tiniest of bone. It's wild what is happening.
And that speed of standing up this entire field of investigative technique is, there's both a mandate to get to the answers as quickly as we can, but that also has created some problems for the field in terms of what's the right way for us to approach this. What are the ethical concerns that we need to understand and address in order to do this work. You know, what's the right way to handle the data?
Mhm.
What's the right way to communicate with people in the databases, with law enforcement, with families? So there's a lot of learning and building the plane as we're flying it. Not just at DNA Doe Project, but at other organizations that are doing similar work. We're all kind of inventing this still, and it's a field that has so much complexity and so many variables and so many levers that are at play, that there's a lot to consider as we move forward into the future of this work.
Yeah, Whitney and I worked with a family that Whitney, you know more about this, but the lab shut down that they created the profile. The DNA was sent to this particular lab, and then it shut down, and the family had no idea how to go about pulling. I'm like, is it stored somewhere just on a cloud? How? I don't even know the process behind that. But that, like you said, like that's an ethical issue. Where is this information and where is this being housed now that's not even a company anymore?
Yeah.
And like, does it fall under HIPAA? Does it not fall under HIPAA?
Right.
You know, like who's responsible for all of this data and this information? Because, you know, you think about hospitals, they're legally required to destroy all records and things of that nature. But when these boutique labs, as I believe they're called, or what they've been called to us before, all of these boutique labs shut down, who's responsible at that point?
Right.
No one really
But,
knows.
you know, even the HIPAA laws have come into being, you know, over time, right? It's
right.
You know, when I was younger, you could just call up the hospital and ask for a status on somebody, and they didn't, you know, you didn't have to have any sort of relationship, or they didn't even confirm that. They would just tell you. So, yeah.
In our research, you know, so we rely a lot on newspapers, and yeah, you look at newspapers from not that long ago, and they've got a column of who's in the hospittal and why. Yeah, hard. I mean,
just some of the verbiage in those.
Like juvenile arrests, and what you know, where these juveniles are being held, you know, after their arrest, and specifically what they're arrested for, and it's shocking sometimes to our modern sensibilities. But yeah, privacy evolves over time.
That's very true.
Melissa, she's in Florida, and the media, is that what you were going to say? The media there has they can put everything out there, whether they're juvenile or not. It's wild. So she sends me stuff all the time, and I'm like, how can they put that out there?
So they, like the whole Florida man thing, I swear that's because our newspapers or how information, like there's no rules. They can put a 12-year-old was arrested, their name out there and everything. They do it here. It's absolutely insane. I didn't know this for the longest time about Florida, and I'm like, no wonder we seem crazy, because they let everyone know what's happening.
So you touched on the 3 different databases that people can upload their data to. And Melissa has done this for hers. She was able to do one. I have not personally done one. I want to do one. I just have not gotten the opportunity to do it. So there is DNA.
Check in with us at the conference. We'd probably hook you up with the box of.
I got you, Whitney.
Yeah.
Perfect, thanks. We'll do it like live for social media or something.
Go. Yeah.
Yes.
So there's GEDmatch, there's Family Tree DNA, and there's DNA Justice, but they're not one solid database. They're each their own, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Each of these databases is run by a private company. So DNA Justice is a nonprofit organization. It's just getting started. They really need a lot more uploads to that database in order to make it really, really useful for IGG work. The great thing about that database, though, is that every single person who uploads there knows that their DNA is going to be used in law enforcement cases. So it is purely for law enforcement, and law enforcement pays nothing to access that database. There's no fee for upload on either the consumer side or the professional side, and it's it's available for us to use, which is why we love nonprofits, right? That's their mission, is to make things affordable and usable. The other 2 databases are held by private companies, and they're obviously considerably bigger, considerably older. But when you're looking at a private for-profit company, then you get the kind of upload fees that we've seen that have increased dramatically over the past few years. And that's how the costs tend to skyrocket. And sometimes, was I still on audio? Did my camera?
You're fine.
You're good.
Sometimes, the terms of service can change. They change the rules about how your database or how your data is being used, how your profile is being used. So, that's part of the collective building of trust. Is we also need to make sure that the databases build that trust with the community as well.
Yeah, and I actually have an interesting story. The case that I was talking about earlier, a parent had uploaded their DNA in hopes of finding out what happened to their daughter. What they didn't know is that the terms of service changed on that kit that they uploaded, and they needed to opt in for the remains to be compared to them. So while it didn't take us too long to figure that out, it would have been instant had we been able to see that parent's kit in the database.
Wow.
How do you guys choose which database, or do you look at all three when you're comparing, or how does that work?
We usually start with GEDmatch, or uploading our profile to GEDmatch Pro.
Okay.
And DNA Justice, since it's free, always want to upload there, nothing to lose. Because we want to be good stewards, whether it's our money or the agency's money. So we want to look at what we get with GEDmatch. GEDmatch has such a nice suite of sort of, analytical tools. So it's a great choice. And it's also, a decent size in the universe of databases we're allowed to use. But if we look at it and the team works the case for a little while and it just looks really tough, then we'll say, okay, it's worth spending the money, crossing our fingers and hoping we'll get some additional matches in family tree DNA that, might be a little closer, or, in conjunction with the GEDmatch matches might help us figure it out. So we sort of see how it goes. And if we need to pay for a second upload into family tree DNA, then we'll do it.
It's such a gamble.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, my DNA is in GEDmatch. So I'm like, should I go put it in the other ones as well?
You did
or
both.
Does it really make a difference? Did I do both?
You did family tree as well. You did not do DNA Justice though.
Okay.
Do that.
Yeah, do that one.
I will go do that one. It's already out there. I'm like,
different practitioners will, some start with family tree DNA. So, if you're there, that's good. And, these, as Pam was saying, these private companies, they're, for profit. So they're going to have to raise prices, but they could decide this isn't lucrative and we're just going to go out of business too. And this is why DNA Justice is sort of a lifeboat, right? Yes. Because if we lose the databases, game over with this technique, right? Because you need that. You need those comparisons. So I would encourage people to also consider uploading to DNA Justice because it's not a commercial entity trying to turn a profit. So it doesn't have the same pressures. And we always want something, right? Because we don't want to lose this tool that we have.
Okay, definitely.
Absolutely.
Will recommend people do that if they are so inclined.
Yes. So Pam, you for sure are coming to AdvocacyCon. Do you want to tell our people that are going to be there that may be watching what you might be presenting on, because you will be presenting?
Yeah, our talk is going to be called DNA and Breadcrumbs, and it is advice for families of the missing and for advocates for those families on the ways to make sure that if their loved one is a Jane or John Doe that we happen to be working on, or another provider of IgG happens to be working on, that we will be able to make that match as quickly and efficiently as possible. So we're going to be sharing a little bit about how the technique actually works and what we need to make it work, and then also sharing some advice for families.
Yeah.
And Rhonda's going to be there with me.
I will.
Oh,
yes.
Jen's taking a break from conference life, but we'll also have a handful of amazing volunteers, including some of our IgG team that are going to be helping out with our booth at AdvocacyCon. So we're really excited.
Oh,
We're
that's going to be
excited to have you
amazing
there.
for the families. They're going to have so many questions about it because there is going to be quite a few families with missing loved ones. So,
Yeah,
oh,
and
wow.
it's heartbreaking. We hear
Yeah.
from them too. They email us. They want us to take up the case, and it's the wrong end of the process for us to work directly with families of the missing. But we know how to get to them through the process, and so helping them understand what we're trying to accomplish and how they can help us is what the goal is.
Yeah, and how to set it up so that if their loved one happened to ever be found, then it would be a smoother transition for you guys figuring it out, because so many people don't know. Whitney and I learned because of Laura Norton that you have to know where to go get your dental records for your loved one. Like, I don't know what I was thinking after all. Like, we've been in this industry for a couple of years, but I'm like, I never really thought about you having to know what dentist your loved one went to in order to get those records.
Right.
So you got to know.
Last. Dental records are not
exactly.
Forever.
Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. And then they only hold them for so long. But I can't, I don't know who my sister's dentist is, or my brother-in-law, or even my mom's dentist. But I wouldn't have even thought to hey, y'all need to write that down in your special information for in case something happens. Hide a little black book somewhere for me or something, because I would have never thought of that ever. Yeah, I would have just assumed that law enforcement could get it somehow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you just don't know the things you don't know. And all the people in these situations, they definitely, never expected to lose their loved one. So it's the more tips and tricks we can give them, the better. So I thank you guys so much for attending and doing what you do. I did have a question. If we only have a couple more minutes, if you guys wanted to answer, how did you get into this? It seems so like a very niche topic. I don't know if anyone, when they were growing up, was like, I'm going to be a genealogist.
Rhonda, I think you should tell your story.
Yeah, I think we'll let Rhonda tell her story.
Okay, well, I was pregnant with twins, and I thought, wow, how does this happen? It was kind of a shock to me, and I thought, well, no one in my family has twins, so, and then I realized I don't really know that much about my family history. Maybe there are twins. And I was on bed rest and had nothing else to do. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to start researching. And I got hooked and been doing genealogy ever since. And then 2 years later, DNA testing came out. Ooh, another cool thing to do, right? So I took a DNA test and I got the results back. And my top match was somewhere around a first cousin. And I had no clue who they were. They were from 2 states away from where I grew up. And I thought, who is this person, and why doesn't her tree look anything like my tree? Well, it turns out I had a half aunt 2 states away that no one knew about. My grandfather was a truck driver, and guess where he drove truck? Well, 2 states away. So it was an amazing experience to get to meet her. And so that's one of the things we tell people when they take a DNA test. You might get results you don't expect, so please be prepared for that.
Oh, interesting. I love that story.
That's amazing. Okay, so any last information you would want to share that we maybe have not covered?
I just want to say, all of the people we identify are missing people. They've all been disconnected from their lives and their communities and the people that loved them and knew them. And so this work is really, really meaningful to be able to resolve those mysteries, to set things right, to make sure that people have an opportunity to be laid to rest with their name. It's the first thing that we're given when we're born, and it should be the thing that is durable about us when we're gone.
That's amazing. And where can everyone find you other than your website? We've got that in the chat. Where should they follow you, share all the things? that the youngins do these days.
I know all those social things. So I have to look at my screen to remember which ones we have. We have a pretty big presence on Facebook. Professionally, we're on LinkedIn. We love to connect with people, like-minded people on LinkedIn as well. We have an Instagram account that mirrors our Facebook. We have X, we have Threads, and recently added Blue Sky. And we are, is that what it's called? Blue Sky? Is that what the name of it is? Okay, good.
I think so. Yeah. I was like, I think so.
A hairline instead of a social media. So you can follow us on all the social media channels. We don't have a whole lot on our YouTube channel right now, but there's more coming soon for that. Yeah. We've got some new volunteers who are interested in helping develop some more video content, so that's coming soon.
But we do have how to download your profile from Ancestry or 23andMe and upload it to GEDmatch or Family Tree DNA. So we do have that.
Okay.
Most important.
Yes. Right. Well, it is a process though to do that, so it's good. Directions are needed. It's not just a click here thing.
Well, we want to thank y'all so much for spending your evening with us together. It's truly amazing that you guys do what you do, and we appreciate you taking an hour plus out of your evening to share that. And we can't wait to see you in 1 month and 1 day.
Yeah.
Not that we're freaking out.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Yeah. We look forward to seeing everyone in the audience out in Indianapolis.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.